कोऽपि न कण्ठास्थितौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परो प्रेमामृतं मनिधि धीरा जन प्रियौ प्रियकरौ निर्मत्सरौ पूजितौ श्री चैतन्य कृपा भरौ भुवि भुव भारावहन्तारकौ वन्दे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्रीजीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परो प्रेमामृतं निधि धीरा धीर जन प्रियं प्रियकरौ निर्मत्सरौ पूजितौ नाना शास्त्र विचारणैक निपुणं तद्धर्म संस्थापकौ लोकानां हितकारिणौ त्रिभुवने मन्नौ शरण्याकरौ नाना शास्त्र विचारणैक निपुणं सद्धर्म संस्थापकौ लोकानां हितकारिणौ त्रिभुवने मन्नौ शरण्याकरौ राधा कृष्ण पदारविन्द भजनानन्देन मत्वालिकौ वन्दे रूप सनातनौ रघुजुगौ श्रीजीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परो प्रेमामृतं निधि श्री चैतन्य कृपाभरौ भुवि भुव भारावहन्तारकौ वन्दे रूप सनातनौ रघुजुगौ श्रीजीव गोपालकौ श्रीगौराङ्ग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ सध्यासमिद्धार्मितं पापत्रापनिकृन्तनं तनभितां गोविन्द गानामृतैः श्री गौरांग गुणानुवर्णन विधौ सध्यासमिद्धान्वितं पापत्यापनिकृन्तनं तनभितां गोविन्दगानामृतं आनन्दान्बुधिवर्धनैकनिपुणं कैवल्यनिस्वार्थं वन्दे रूप सनातनौ रघुजुगौ श्रीजीव गोपालकौ कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परो प्रेमामृतं निधि तत्त्वातो नमसे समण्डलपति शनि सदा तुच्छम भूत्वा दीनगणेशकौ करुणया कोऽपि न कण्ठास्थितौ Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tana Pano Premamritam Manidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyau Priyakarau Nirmasaram Pujitau Śrī Chaitanya Kripa Bharau Bhuvi Bhuva Bharavahantarakam Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghujagam Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tana Pano Premamritam Manidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyam Priyakaram Nirmasaram Pujitam Nana Shastra Vicharanayika Nipunam Tadharma Sangstapakam Lokanang
Hey, Shamsaki. Looks like it's just you and me, and I can't get this thing to start on Facebook, so we may not have a class today. I got no participants, and I can't stream. Wait, I got another phone in.
Kumagyanatmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Ajunulambito Bujo Kanakabhatatu Sankirtanaya Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijabaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Vande Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahodito Gurudaya Pushpavanto Chitra Sangdo Tamuno Vandeham Shri Ramakrishna Abhayo Charano Sako Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subalapriyo Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye.
Glorious devotees, thank you so much for coming. We have a very poor internet connection here today, and because of that, my attempts to live stream on Facebook are not meeting with any success. Oh, maybe we just got through. Krishna's mercy. In order to capitalize on the little bit of internet that I do have here, because it does seem that we're streaming now to Facebook, I am going to take my video off. So the only thing you'll see today are the slides, which we'll be discussing, and hopefully that'll give us a little better feed and a little better throughput to Facebook today. So. Shri Gaudiya Vaishnav Guru Parampara ki jai, Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī ki jai, Sandarbhas ki jai. Anantakota Vaishnavindiki Jai. We continue today with our discussion. Oh, wait, I have one chat here. We'll continue with our discussion today of one specific anuccheda from the Bhagavat Sandarbha, wherein Jiva Gosvāmī speaks about the Brahman conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So let's see. So again, we come back to the main anuccheda, which gives the seed conception, the entire Sandarbhas, as presented by Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī at the beginning of his Tattva Sandarbha, and his specific anuccheda corresponds with the Vedanti Tat verse from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Vedanti Tat Tatta Vidas Tatpamyas Janamadvayam Prameti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Sabdyate. So I wanted to, we're now on the seventh anuccheda. We spoke last week on the sixth anuccheda, the person eligible for Brahman realization, wherein it was revealed that that person who wants to enter into Brahman realization is required to engage in sadhana bhakti and worship the Supreme Lord. And we specifically spoke about a verse from the Bhagavatam, wherein the mental attitude of that devotion by that yogi and that engagement in sadhana affords them the opportunity to actually have a taste for the sweetness of the personal conception of the Lord. So that taste for the sweetness results in some abhas, some shadow of the symptoms of bhava, trembling, hair standing on end, tears falling from the eyes. But it's pointed out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on this verse from the Bhagavatam, that their hook-like mind, although capturing through their devotional activities the attention of Krishna, despite their capturing his attention, the purpose, the intent of their sadhana or their engagement in the activities of bhakti is simply to eventually attain his blessings and through his blessings reach a level of realization of Brahman. So their mind is considered to be like a hook. And even though they melt in ecstatic symptoms from capturing the Lord, just like placing an iron hook in a fire, it will melt. But removing it from the fire, it again takes on its normal characteristics of being hard. And similarly, that yogi, his heart is also hearted, even though he's been touched by an association or an abhas of an association of the Supreme Lord. This, of course, affords him the opportunity to go forward and merge into that Brahman conception entirely, having been blessed by the Supreme Lord. So we're going to go on to the anucceda number 7 regarding that manifestation of Brahman, having covered that person that was eligible. So anucceda 7 reads as follows. In the following verse and a half, Sri Brahma explains to Narada some specifics about the Brahman feature. And then then Jīva Gosvāmī quotes a verse from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. That which the sages know as Brahman, which is uninterrupted joy and completely devoid of grief, is merely the pedestal, pada, of Bhagavan, the Supreme Person. It is eternally tranquil, free from fear, exclusively of the nature of unadulterated consciousness, pure, unchanging, beyond all cause and effect, the source of all individual beings, which cannot be realized through the performance of sacrifice or the chanting of Vedic mantras, and before which the external energy personified, Maya, flees out of shame. Jīva Gosvāmī continues in his anuccheda to unpack this verse. The meaning here is as follows. That which is known as Brahman, owing to its being the greatest of the great, is but the pedestal of the Supreme Person, Bhagavan, because the Absolute is first immediately intuited as indeterminate. Since Brahman is Bhagavan's feature as indeterminate existence, and since the immediate apprehension of Bhagavan, who is self-endowed with various wonderful qualities, such as a beautiful form, occurs only after the intuition of Brahman, this Brahman, which is the innate existence of Bhagavan, is thus the basis for the realization of Bhagavan, Padam Bhagavata. Sri Brahma then goes on to explain the essential characteristics of indeterminate Brahman with words such as pratibodha matra, unadulterated consciousness, and ajasra sukha, uninterrupted joy. So we can see that Jīva Gosvāmī, by relating in his anuccheda this one verse from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, he's bringing out by a unpacking of that verse the exact nature of Brahman realization and how that Brahman realization is experienced, and as he says in the verse, as Brahma says in the verse, I believe it was Brahma. Yes, Brahma is speaking to Narada here, and he's explaining as Brahman is this pedestal, pada, of Bhagavan. It's the basis upon which self-realization begins to manifest. In that, first we have this Brahman conception and revelation. Now it's a little different, as will be pointed out when we get to the commentary section. It's a little different for the bhaktas. They do have an initial revelation of Brahman as they progress and as they in their devotional life, but that is not the same as those transcendentalists who aspire to enter into Brahman as their ultimate goal. I'm going to read on a little bit and explain as we read here. That substantive, which appears as the absence of matter and sorrow, which is eternal, unchanging, is Brahman, the Atma Tattva, the root source of all selves. The word Atma here indicates that Brahman is realized as self-luminous and as the essential ground of untainted supreme love. How is it that the joy found in Brahman is uninterrupted? Brahmaji says, Brahman is eternally tranquil, sasvat prasantam, and eternally free from disturbance. Similarly, Brahman is free from fear, abhaya, and exempt from grief, visoka. Piety is not the cause of this joy, as implied by the phrase, which cannot be realized through the performance of sacrifices or the chanting of Vedic mantras. Sounds or words intoned during the performance of sacrifice, which generate piety, are ineffective in bringing about apprehension of Brahman. Only the Upanishads have the self-illuminating power to disclose Brahman, as is said, I inquire about that person who is known from the Upanishads. Any supposition that Brahman's essential joy arises from the senses is rendered inconsistent by the use of the words like Suddha, pure. Pure here means free from defects. Sama, unchanging, means devoid of any increment or decrement. And Sad Asata Param means situated beyond all cause and effect. So what Jiva's bringing out here is the fact that this Brahman realization has to be obtained as it descends from the transcendental realm. Now, of course, we know that the yogi and also the bhakti can engage in certain processes whereby they can make the field of their heart, they can prepare the field of their heart for practice that will eventually lead to the opportunity for transcendental realization to take hold. But transcendental revelation and realization, whether it be that of Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan, that is coming down from the transcendental realm. So there's no amount of piety. What Jiva's pointing out here by unpacking Brahma's statement from the Bhagavatam is no amount of sacrificial activities. Sacrificial activities basically are entered into in order to gain heaps of piety. And those heaps of piety can be utilized within material life to offset heaps of sinful reaction, which may come from all kinds of activities that we engage with in material life. So that kind of an action, those kind of sacrifices performed with that intent are not going to allow the practitioner the revelation of Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. It's a very important point that we need to understand. And we understand that specifically in relationship to bhakti by the use of the term in bhakti, yadrichaya. there's really nothing that brought about the good fortune which afforded us as practitioners of bhakti. There's nothing that we did that gave us an opportunity for that good fortune. That good fortune is coming from the transcendental realm. Now it's coming in a specific way. It's coming through the empowerment of bhakti in the Lord's devotees. So the Lord's devotees are those dispensers of that good fortune whereby one can engage in the practice of bhakti. Similarly, here in this verse, Brahma is pointing out that the practice of a spiritual discipline with the intent of the realization of the Brahman feature of the absolute truth, that is nurtured by the descent of transcendental form that's available through the Upanishads. So it's not that those yogis, transcendentalists striving for Brahman are going to be able to attain that by any amount of sacrificial activity, by any amount of personal endeavor. It's not possible. And we should understand this, as I said, deeply, because sometimes we see, as we read Shastra, statements to the effect that even no amount of sadhana can afford us entrance and true an advancement in bhakti, that bhakti is acting on her own. She is completely independent. There's nothing we can do to capture bhakti, just as there's nothing we can do to capture the Lord. But as Swami Tripurari likes to say, and I think it's well said by him there, that we endeavor in the practice of sadhana bhakti as if the result was dependent on our endeavor, knowing all the while that truly the result is fully dependent on the merciful dispensation of the guru, of the sadhus, of Bhakti Devi herself, of Lord Krishna. All these are the true contributing factors to our spiritual advancement. So even looking here to this verse, we can find insights into what is the essence of devotional practice and the true underlying truth as far as spiritual advancement. We'll read on here a little bit. What more is there to say, Jiva Goswami writes? Maya herself cannot remain before Brahman. Out of shame, she flees from those who are favorably disposed to Brahman, the living, liberated beings, Jivan Muktas, keeping far, far away from them. So when you see somebody in the world like a Sukadeva Goswami, someone that's fully free from the influence of Maya, fully liberated, they're not influenced at all by the modes of material nature. When the true nature of Bhagavan is made clearly visible, Brahman is automatically understood. Thus, Brahma Sandarbha is contained within Bhagavat Sandarbha. So Jiva takes us to this point that truly there's not much more to be said about this pedestal that holds up the Supreme Lord, which is simply a manifestation of his indeterminate feature. If we take transcendence and we take away all of its characteristics, what we're left with is this essential, joyful nature of being, which is Brahman. Little something from the commentary on this particular anuccheda. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes a verse from Sisupal Vada by the poet Magha to elucidate this point. The verse gives a description of Narada Muni arriving at the Sudharma assembly house of the Yadavas in Dwarka. As Narada had the mystic power to fly, he approached by way of the sky. The quote is as follows: Sri Krishna first saw him as a bright mass of effulgence. When he came closer, he could understand that it was some being having a body. When he came still closer, he saw a human form. When he landed in front of them, he finally recognized him as Sri Narada. Similarly, this Brahman conception, we have to understand, even though we often hear this is the effulgence of the Supreme Lord. Well, if we're to consider this effulgence, unlike the radical non-dualists, the Mayavadis, their conception is it is just the effulgence. But as we know, any illumination, there has to be a source for the illumination. So similarly, there has to be a source for this Brahman effulgence. Just as the illumination coming from the sun cannot exist without the sun globe, similarly, Brahman cannot exist without the source of Brahman, which is Bhagavan. Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī concludes by saying that if Bhagavan is rightly understood, one will know Brahman in the proper perspective. In fact, one cannot come to a thorough understanding of Brahman without understanding Bhagavan, inasmuch as one cannot understand sunlight without the sun. Therefore, Jīva Gosvāmī did not compile a separate treatise on Brahman, although Brahman is the subject of hundreds of books by Manas and other schools in Vedanta. Actually, no independent analysis is required. Hence, these few paragraphs, which conclude with this verse, can be called Brahma Sandarbha. But they are, in fact, but a small portion of Bhagavat Sandarbha. Śrī Jīva Gosvāmī analyzes Bhagavat Tattva from this perspective. What more is there to say? When we consider from our perspective, from the school of bhakti, this whole idea regarding the supreme absolute truth, the Brahman aspect is truly minuscule in relationship to all that can be said about Krishna and his various potencies, his shaktis, his energies, his associates, his leelas, his dhams. There's unlimited, so unlimited that as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur pointed out, we can print a paper every day about Krishna and there never reach an end of what could be said. Like Ananta, he can chant continually about the unlimited potencies and qualities of the Supreme Lord and never even touch upon a fraction of them. as I said when we began these discourses, I wanted to give everyone a good overview of what is in the beginning 3 Sandarbhas before we dive deeply into the Krishna Sandarbha, which is that conception of the supreme absolute truth, which is so key to our ideal and to our desire for spiritual attainment. So we went through to some little bit of detail the Tattva Sandarbha. We're not going into the Bhagavat Sandarbha quite as deeply, but I do think that it will serve all of us well to look at just this table of contents of the anucchedas that constitute the Bhagavat Sandarbha. So we've gone into some detail on the 6th and 7th anuccheda. We can see that Jiva Goswāmī then begins to develop more and reveal to the readers the nature of Bhagavan. And just as he did with Brahman realization, the person eligible for Brahman, he says devotion is the means for Bhagavan realization. And as we went into, that devotion is coming in a causeless manner into the world, into human society, through the devotees, through the sadhus, through those that have some personal relationship with Krishna, with Bhagavan. They can share that with others. And that is truly the core of the retelling by Śrīla Vyasadeva of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's a samadhi bhashya that what we are striving for and what the Bhagavat Purana is giving as the foundation of our spiritual practice is all based upon realization of the Supreme Lord. That is our objective. We want to realize Krishna fully. And just as Brahman realization is the pedestal upon which the personalized aspect of the Supreme stands, so that upon the Brahman realization, then we can begin to enter into a deep appreciation of the various characteristics of the personality of Godhead. And then we can enter deeper through Brahman, through the Bhagavan realization into Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. This key Pariva Sutra of the Bhagavat Sandarbha that allows us enters into the deep understanding of what is Krishna, the supreme personality of Godhead. So, devotion is the means to Bhagavan realization. Bhagavan manifests according to the mood of the devotee. And then Jiva goes on to explain the mutually conflicting potencies. How can you have, the Lord and how can there be all of the various energies coming from the Supreme Lord, which seem to be in conflict, the spiritual realm and the material realm. entirely different from each other. And I wanted to touch upon a couple points from the 16th Anuccheda, which I would, again, I'm just bringing out different Anucchedas to highlight them so that hopefully I can, with the hook of these discourses, capture your curiosity to, when your time allows and your study proclivity so directs you, inspires you to enter deeply into Jiva Goswami's immense contribution. This contribution is as I said, it forms a firm foundation upon which our deep development of a relationship with the Supreme Lord can be built. So it's not that we should expect, without understanding as deeply as our intellect allows, and as much as that understanding nourishes our practice, that we can just immediately jump to wanting to, we can, from the beginning, of course, want to have a personal relationship with Krishna, but a full development of that loving relationship with the Supreme Lord will entail a full appreciation for everything that he is. And like this Bhagavat Sandarbha that Jiva's offering, he's pulling things out of the Bhagavatam to introduce us to the nature of the Supreme Lord. And the more we know him, the more we can develop our loving sentiments for him. These things do go hand in hand as a general principle. There are exceptions, but the general rule is advancing through the stages of sadhana bhakti in order to assist us in clearing, in going through the stages of bhajana kriya, coming up to the stage of setting the misconceptions aside, anartha nivritti. This stage of anartha nivritti is not just the stage of giving up bad habits from a moralistic viewpoint. It's giving up also misconceptions regarding what is God, what are God's different energies, how do those different energies interact, and all those understandings, when seen properly, when we've developed the proper conceptual orientation under the direction of the spiritual master, with the guidance of the sadhus and the shastra, when these things combine to give us the deepest proper conceptual understanding, then our love will truly blossom. This is the normal course in the progression from sadhana to bhava to prema bhakti. So let's look at this one Anuccheda here. The 16th Anuccheda. The one Anuccheda, the reason I brought it out is the Anuccheda itself in book form comprises 25 pages, just this one Anuccheda. So Jiva's really highlighting this point for us as readers of the Bhagavat Sandarbha, that Krishna has unlimited intrinsic potencies. This is from the anucceda itself. The one absolute reality, by its natural inconceivable power, always exists in four aspects: as his own self, swarup, as his inherent magnificence, tadrupa vibhav, or in other words, the transcendental potency inherent in and emanating from his being, his swarup shakti. 3, as the living beings, jivas, and 4, as pradhan, the unmanifest material nature. So in this anuccheda, as I said, which is so extensive, he completely unpacks these four ideas as to the nature of the Lord's intrinsic energies. And we can see by just simply looking at the titles of various anucchedas, the unpacking, the understanding of Maya's two divisions, the jiva dependent on Bhagavan for his power of cognition, and coming up to the 24th anuccheda, the qualities of Bhagavan are intrinsic to its nature. A further unpacking here in the 24th anuccheda. Now, by concluding that all of Bhagavan's qualities and such belong to his essential nature, anucchedas 11 through 24, his internal energy will be further explained from here through the end of this Sandarbha in the prayers of the personified Vedas. It is affirmed that the qualities of the Lord are inherent in his swarup. They are intrinsic to his nature. So now Jiva is going to go deeper into and explain to us the nature of his internal energy and further unpack that. Something from the commentary here that I wanted to share. There's quite a few things. As I think it's important that we gain some entrance into the core of what is the Bhagavat Sandarbha. So written there in the commentary by Satyanarayan Das Babaji, the philosophy of Bhagavatam establishes one absolute non-dual truth without any peer. The natural questions that follow are, why is there empirical duality? And what is the nature of this absolute truth that is one without a second? This is a difficult subject to understand and even more difficult to explain. Different wisdom schools have propagated different doctrines attempting to accommodate empirical duality within the transcendental absolute. This terminology, achinta, inconceivable, it's knowable, but these conflicting potencies are quite amazing. So different wisdom schools. Excuse me 1 second. Attempting to accommodate empiric duality within the transcendental absolute. So naturally, it's going to be difficult for us to understand this, because we can understand the world of duality, but then you're talking about the absolute world and the absolute truth and that personality, he also has characteristics, and he also has associates, and he has abodes, and he engages in activities himself, transcendental lila, which appear to be of the same nature as the dualities that we engage in within his external energy. So how are these things explained? Mainly, they can be divided into two groups: those who regard the absolute as oneness only, radically unqualified, non-theistic Vedanta. In other words, really the topmost absolute realization from a certain group of transcendentalists, which we call radical transcendentalists, Mayavadis. They look upon anything that has any duality as Maya. So if there's any characteristics, any qualities that are coming, they have to be seen as coming in the same way as the realities and the dualities of material existence. Because in the ultimate end, the supreme cannot have individualized characteristics and qualities. Those are only available in the world of duality. The first group comprehends absolute reality as undifferentiated, all-pervading, and devoid of energy, quality, and personhood. This includes primarily Sankaracharya's Mayavad interpretation of Advaitavad. So the first group, non-theistic Vedanta, comprehends absolute reality as undifferentiated, all-pervading, and devoid of energy, quality, and personhood. It couldn't be any other way from their perspective. From their perspective, if there is any qualities, anything of anything that resembles, there cannot be anything that resembles what is experienced in the material realm in the transcendental realm. The second group, the theistic Vedantists, including the Vaishnavas, who mainly adhere to 5 philosophies: Vasist Advaitavad, non-duality with distinction of Sri Ramanujacharya, Dvaitavad, duality of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Swabhavika Bheda, simultaneously duality and non-duality of Sri Nimbarkacharya, Sudadvaita, pure Advaita of Sri Ballavacharya, and Achinta Bheda of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So all these different conceptions from the theistic viewpoint are just different ways of looking at the Lord's energies. They're looked at differently by these different schools of Vaishnavas. They all accept the supreme personality of Godhead, that Bhagavan, the absolute truth, and the ultimate issue is a person, and he has various energies. Now, how do they look at those energies? Those differ from one group to another, as propounded by one sampradaya or another, and their main proponents. We'll finish up a little bit from this commentary here. According to Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī, the Bhagavatam philosophy propounds the doctrine of Achinta Bheda. In fact, this term itself is said to have come from Śrīla Jīva Gosvāmī. The Supreme Lord has energies, and these energies are simultaneously one with and different from him. This is inconceivable. Such inconceivability does not imply implausibility. After all, logically, the absolute truth has to have such inconceivable features, because it is the plane of existence wherein all contradictions are reconciled. Here, oneness and difference must coexist. So this idea of the inconceivable potencies of the Lord for those in our sampradaya, our school of thought, these are not difficult to, as explained here, they're not implausible. We can understand how the baby Krishna can be sitting on Yasoda's lap and open his mouth, and Yasoda can look in his mouth and see everything existing within him, including herself holding Krishna on her lap, opening his mouth infinitely. This is not implausible to us. We understand the Lord has infinite potencies and infinite, we cannot come to an end of it. Just like the Brahma Vimohan Leela, how to comprehend this Brahma Vimohan Leela, that enlightened Brahma as to the nature, the true nature of Krishna at the height of his play, and gave him entrance into the deepest revelations regarding the Lord. And truly, if you think of a Chinta Beta Beta, inconceivably one and different, what is more inconceivably one and different than the Lord expanding himself as all the cowherds and all the calves, holding on to all the specific characteristics of their personalities to such an extent that even their parents could not detect a difference. How much that gives us entrance into some little idea of the potencies of the Supreme Lord and how he is truly the self of all selves. And as much as we think we know ourselves, he knows us to that extent and more. How deep is that philosophical understanding? So all these various contradictions that one could see and point out, which Jiva unpacks in this Bhagavat Sandarbha, and how to see those through the eyes of the Bhagavat and truly understand that Krishna can possess all these characteristics and all these apparent contradictions can be there. So much so, as we say, that he can be, through his various Shaktris and his expansions of his various aspects of his self into different personalities that maintain all of Vaikuntha, that maintain and develop the whole material energy. From Narayan to the various manifestations of Paramatma, Karna-Dakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, Kashira-Dakshai Vishnu, all the while that Krishna is manifesting all of this, he himself can be engaged in the most intimate, loving exchanges in pastimes with his closest associates in Goloka and in various expansions from there throughout the unlimited universes. In Gokuls, where he's enacting his pastimes to capture the interest of humanity. He can be all that to such an extent that when engaged in those pastimes, as Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the Bhagavan can be set aside. His godhood could be set aside. How wonderful and inconceivable is that? So we have another subject that we're going to enter into from the Bhagavat Sandarbha before we push on to the Paramatma Sandarbha for a quick overview of Krishna's manifestation from Bhagavan. From Bhagavan, we get this other expansion, Narayan, as we said, and we get to this stage of the Srishti Leela and the desire to show compassion coming in the Paramatma. So again, just scan through these various anucchedas and the titles that have been attributed to them. His form's unlimited, his body is Advaya Brahma, his form's unlimited, it contains everything. Krishna's the Paramatma, part 1 and part 2. His name, form, actions, and attributes are all transcendental. His senses are transcendental, contradictory statements reconciled. Again, Jīva Gosvāmī has taken, and by exploring the Bhagavatam to such depth, he's been able to pull out all these various nuggets of transcendental truth, these various tattvas, and expand upon them by highlighting different portions of the Bhagavat Purana, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and in such a way that although we may have read the Bhagavatam, did we ever see that nugget of transcendental reality and truth was in that verse? He brings all those out from his perspective as presented. And believe me, there are unlimited sandarbhas that can be written from that Bhagavat Purana. This is just Jīva Gosvāmī bringing out these different aspects of transcendental reality, but these verses in and of themselves can be unpacked in so many different ways to bring out so much transcendental reality. He's given us an entrance into how that is accomplished in our sampradaya and how it is accomplished by the acharyas coming forth from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we come on to this 61st Anuccheda, and we're going to begin there in our next discussion. I hope you're able to attend the next discussion where we'll cover this, and we're going to enter into, as you can see, a very interesting subject matter. No one falls to the material world. As you can imagine, the commentary alone on this 61st Anuccheda is the longest that is presented in the Bhagavat Sandarbha. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to present in our next class the necessity for presenting for preaching purposes, a different idea, and also the fact that truly any misconceptions that may be there as regards to the nature of the jiva and the source of the jiva can be properly comprehended from the Bhagavatam, and that really even my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada, his apparently contradictory statements in this regard, how they can be reconciled, and how there's truly, although he made other statements, his Bhagavatam commentary itself is consistent as to the nature of this matter. So hopefully we'll be able to present some interesting points there in our next discussion. I thank you so much for your association. If anybody has any questions, we will certainly attempt to answer them. No one's coming forward. I will, as always, thank you so much for your kind association. Vanchakalpatubhyascha, Kripasindabevacha, Patitanam Pabevyo, Vaishnavijya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Shriman Dulal Chandra Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Dana.
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Manidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priyau Priyakarau Nirma